Hello, thank you for joining us today. My name is Emily Pelley, and I am the Publications Coordinator for Ratio Christi Canada. Ratio Christi Press has been putting out fantastic resources on apologetics issues for university students and for you. These are really important topics of classical apologetics right through to certain important cultural issues. And so today we get to talk with an author of one of those booklets, Scarlett Clay. Scarlett is the author of the book, The Apologetic of Art, How Beauty and Creativity Point to a Creator. So thank you for joining us, Scarlett.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Fantastic. Okay, well, let's just start with an introduction. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Okay, well, I'm an artist myself. I'm an apologist and author. I do work with Ratio Christi right now, managing our 4 Torah scrolls that travel the country for campus events. So that's my connection to Ratio Christi right now. And I'm also a student finishing up my doctoral program this fall. Praise the Lord.
Woohoo! Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you.
Fantastic. Okay, well, so in this booklet, let's jump right into it, shall we? You began asking the interesting question of, do the arts really have anything to offer apologists? So tell us about how you got started in this area, the connection between art and apologetics.
All right, so there's a long story. I'll give the very abbreviated story. Back in about 2014 to 2015, I was working at the Blanton Museum of Art. This is the art museum on the University of Texas campus. It's a large museum. At that time, I believe it was the 2nd or 3rd largest art museum on a university campus in the country. So it's a very large museum with a lot of works. And I had the great opportunity to both be working in admissions, so I was behind the desk, and I was also a docent leading tours for the public. And so I had the opportunity to see the museum world sort of, from behind the scenes, as exhibitions were being put together, and then also to see people's reactions to these artworks. And so it was a really, really great opportunity. But I began asking questions because there were things, and I know you'll know what I mean, that our exhibition programs and the labels that we were putting up, they just bothered me. A lot of the claims that were coming out of the museum were, they just seemed off. But honestly, Emily, at that time, I did not have the education to put my finger on what it was. I didn't know why there was so much that bothered me. And so I took public transportation to downtown Austin, to work and back to the suburbs every day. And so I had a lot of time to research. And so I began to look into it. I'd just start researching the artist, researching their work on my own. And I don't remember exactly how, but I came in contact with that word worldview. And I had never heard that word before. And so as I began to learn more about that term worldview, it just opened my eyes. And it's like I finally was able to see what was going on. That all the ideas in the museum were directly related to the ideas outside of the museum. And all of it was related directly to my Christian faith. And so that really started my journey of just looking more into it. And, that next year, 2016, I enrolled in the Biola Apologetics program. So that's really how it started.
Amazing. Amazing. So one of the statements that stuck out to me in the booklet, you say, by bringing the arts into our apologetics, we can capture the hearts and minds of our skeptical friends in a powerful way, pointing them to the hope in a life reconciled to God. I love this so much. So help us understand the how. How can art be used in apologetics?
Right, so how to begin, I would say, to use the arts in apologetics, we would first have to start by knowing our Bible. And that's not cliche, that's fact, because when we use the arts in our apologetics, we're going to have to make judgments. we're going to have to make distinctions between beauty and ugliness, between truth and falsehood. So the better we know our Bible, again, which forms our conception of reality, we understand the world we live in, who God is, who we are, all those basic things, we're able to come to art with the confidence to make a judgment. Now, that's hard to do because over a century or more, we've been told we can't judge art, that it's all about subjective opinions. And so we have to be quite brave and confident and well equipped in order to make judgments, because we're going to get opposition when we do that. And so I would think about that first of all. On a recent podcast, my seminary president, Al Mohler, made a really provocative statement. He said, museums are an argument. So if you think about it that way, the way to use arts and apologetics is to simply realize the conversation's already started. The claims are already being made in every gallery, almost in every interpretive label on the gallery walls. Claims are already being made. So what we can do is respond, right? We can make those biblically informed responses. So that's what I encourage people to think about. Something else too is to broaden our idea and understanding of what the arts means. When I was working at the Blanton, I really did think of the arts as painting, sculpture, and maybe I would have thrown music in there. So my idea of the arts was quite narrow. But when you begin to understand that the aesthetic side of life is ubiquitous, it's everywhere. It's not at the fringe of life, it's at the center. Then you've broadened your field. Then you can use, not just the fine arts in your apologetics, but the aesthetic side of life, which is just, like I said, it's everything. One example, a personal example, is I just wrote a brief article on my blog about the aesthetics of Charlie Kirk. Okay, and most people wouldn't make that connection, but when you think about it, his aesthetic and his organization's aesthetic is very strong and powerful. He had logos, and his branding is sharp, it's crisp, the colors are making bold contrast, because his message was there is a right and there's a wrong. And he didn't want to blur those distinctions. And so even from the way his family presents itself in public, they're communicating a message of traditional values, of biblical marriage, of sort of that stability and normalcy in a time of so much confusion. So there is an aesthetic aspect to all of life. Maybe one more example recently was, I don't know if you remember the horrible Texas flooding that happened this last summer. There was a photograph that caught my eye on a BBC article. Someone had come along and arranged some stuffed animals on a windowsill of one of the cabins where several young girls had perished in the flood. And looking at that, you could see the aesthetic aspect of life. They were lovingly placed there, side by side. They were facing out from the wreckage towards the horizon. And so, a Christian worldview makes sense of that. We know life is sacred, life is precious. So we want to memorialize, we want to honor that. So the point is, when you begin to see the aesthetic side of life as ubiquitous, as spanning the vast human experiences that we have, then you've got a lot more ground to work with than if you were just focused on the museum gallery.
That is such an interesting point, because even myself, when I see the word art, I think of the fine arts. But your point of the aesthetic, and how true is that? The atmosphere of our life, the colors, so much of what you described, such great examples. It really does have an important role to play in our messaging of what we're saying and how we live.
It does. It really does. And it really struck me because I also, forgot to say this in the introduction, but I also work as a hospital chaplain right now. And that was in part to balance the academics of studying apologetics. I needed a balance. But, the hospital so often is an aesthetic ghetto. Okay.
Oh, man.
The rooms are plain. The equipment is visually unappealing, even auditorily jarring. But I've noticed that when patients have that warm quilt from home, pictures of grandchildren on the wall, framed photographs, flowers, their spirits are lifted. They are in a better overall just mood, and sort of the way they're facing everything they're going through is really markedly different. And so even things like that, just when you begin to see it, then you really see it, and you see it everywhere.
Yeah, wow. Okay, so later in the booklet, you argue that to see beauty for what it is, we must see Christ for who he is. So what encouragement would you give fellow believers and fellow apologists who for how to draw on art in their apologetics journey?
Yeah, I would encourage them to realize that, well, first of all, we only have so much time. The Lord has numbered our days. We cannot go into everything.
Right.
And so we want to follow the passions and the pursuits that the Lord has given us individually and move in those directions, and to realize that, the earth is the Lord's, right, and the fullness thereof. We're free as Christians to go into the arts. Right? Christ is Lord of the arts, every bit of it. We are free to explore those. And again, on my view, we are duty bound to make a judgment on those things. But I would especially encourage people to realize that we can make powerful art and increase the aesthetic side of life in a biblically informed direction without turning everything into a tract. We don't have to have every artistic project be a Bible study. And this is something I think the Christian world, the evangelical world even as a whole, still doesn't quite get. I think we need to keep saying this. An example, last summer, I think it was 4th of July, my family and I went to see Jurassic World Rebirth. Okay, we love dinosaurs, okay, especially me. I think I love dinosaurs more than anyone else in my family. But we went to see that movie. You would not think there would be anything biblical or overtly Christian about that movie. But here was one of the prominent themes. There were clear good guys, clear bad guys. Okay? The good guys valued human life over the cash in the briefcase. Okay? The bad guys valued the cash over human life. Now, what makes sense of that? Right? That's a biblically informed view of the value of human life. There was no Bible verse in that movie. There was no explicit, character reading the Bible, making these statements, but it communicated a powerful message. So we can do that. We can make powerfully true statements without hitting people over the head. And there's a time, of course, for tracts. There's a time for Bible study. We always want to do those things. But we just, I think, need to realize there's more freedom. Again, thinking of all of life in the aesthetic aspect, I think helps us realize that we can do a lot of good things without being so explicit about that. We're free, right? So, you could paint an oil pastel of the most beautiful bowl of fruit, given to us by God. And that is just as true as the painting of the crucifixion, right? Both are true. Both do justice to reality.
Wow. So interesting. Thank you for sharing this. So before we go, can you tell us a little bit about what you are working on right now?
Well, I'm preparing for my doctoral defense. That's what that's all consuming right now. My defense is on October 10th, so it's just around the corner. So my research focuses on the Dutch art historian, Hans Rookmaker. And if someone is interested in any of the things I'm saying, they will find that and more in his work. He was best friends with Francis Schaeffer, so they were very close friends. So my work focuses on how he worked from a Reformed theology, a Doweerian philosophy, which is a Dutch Christian philosophy, and then used the arts to uphold human value. So human value is really my focus. So that's what I'm working on. And after that, who knows? I'm ready for whatever the Lord has.
That is so exciting. Well, all the best with your defense. I know that can be pretty stressful, but you got this.
Yeah, thank you.
The Apologetic of Art by Scarlett Clay. Scarlett, thank you so much for your time today. If you would like to buy a copy of this booklet, you can go to press.ratiochristi.ca if you are here in Canada, or you can go to ratiochristipress.org if you're in the United States, and you can buy this as an ebook or a paperback. So thank you so much for your time and have a great day.